Hello again. I'm here. Come closer. The Incredible Shrinking Man, published in 1956, is a science fiction novel by Richard Matheson, the famous author and screenwriter. His work includes titles such as I Am Legend, Hell House, and What Dreams May Come. He was also the screenwriter of a few notable films, and he wrote many episodes of the cult classic series The Twilight Zone. But for now, let's focus on The Incredible Shrinking Man. The novel tells the story of Scott Carey, who, after being exposed to a radioactive cloud, discovers his body is slowly but surely shrinking. Each day, he loses 1/7 of an inch of height. This welcomes all kinds of trouble into his life, as his marriage goes downhill, and he becomes the subject of mockery due to his abnormal condition. As he gets smaller and smaller, the struggles to adapt to this new reality get bigger. Things we take for granted, like house pets or insects, become increasingly menacing and otherworldly to the protagonist. After a near-death experience with the family's house cat, Scott ends up trapped in the basement of his own house, and is presumed dead by his loved ones. It is in this location when his true fight for survival begins, as he is now smaller than an action figure. It's in this basement where he encounters his greatest foe and the novel's most iconic image, a black widow spider. It was more than a spider. It was every unknown terror in the world fused into wriggling, poison-jaw horror. It was every anxiety, insecurity, and fear in his life, giving a hideous night black form. About the novel's famous ending, we'll come back to that later, where we'll also talk about—
Ah! What the f—
Quickly after its publication, Matheson started working on a screenplay version of his own story, which would be directed by Jack Arnold, who was already famous from his science fiction work on films such as It Came from Outer Space, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Tarantula. The Incredible Shrinking Man premiered in 1957. The film adaptation kept the main story more or less the same, but made some important changes in its structure. The novel is told in an episodic manner following two different timelines. One is set in the present, where Scott is already surviving the elements in the basement, while the other is told through a series of flashbacks that show how his decreasing height slowly causes his personal life to collapse. The titles of the chapters are Scott's current height in inches, decreasing as the story progresses, creating a countdown effect towards an impending doom. What will happen when that number reaches 0? What happens when he can shrink no more? To Matheson's annoyance, the film ditched the flashback structure he strongly favored and turned it into a linear narrative that basically divides the film into two main parts. The first half depicts Scott's downward spiral as he gets smaller and smaller. It focuses on how the people in his life are affected by it. This section of the film is more about the drama that unfolds as Scott struggles to accept what is happening to him.
I'm getting smaller, Lou, every day.
Well, that's silly, honey. People just don't get smaller.
And then, the second half begins. Scott ends up in the basement, and the film's tone shifts drastically. The relationship drama moves aside to let the story become a man versus nature tale of survival and endurance. The protagonist is now so small that everything is a threat to him. The steps in the staircase have turned into a series of walls and cliffs to climb. The space between furniture now feels as big as a canyon. The room has turned into a hostile environment full of obstacles and danger. Scott needs to adapt. He grabs a pin and turns it into a weapon. His food comes from an old slice of bread. His shelter consists of a box of matches. It all seems to be going okay now. But there's a bigger problem, lurking in the darkness. But what really ties these two versions of the same story together is that they are part of something fascinating that happened with science fiction in the 50s, and that something starts with fear. After the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, the USA continued performing nuclear weapons testing on American soil. This and the beginning of the Cold War, along with several scientific advancements, created a peculiar atmosphere of wonder, paranoia, and dread. People were surprised by how quickly the world was transforming, but this progress was joined by a sense of anxiety and worry too.
How can we tell when the atomic bomb may explode? And a teacher is explaining that there are two kinds of attack, with warning and without any warning.
By the middle of the 20th century, science fiction was not a new genre at all, believed to have its first appearance as early as the 2nd century AD, with the occasional novel delving into the genre the following centuries, and then becoming more prominent by the end of the 1800s. So, what happened in the 1950s? On the one hand, advances in technology made people curious and humankind started looking more and more towards the stars, wondering if there could be other civilizations out there in the vastness of space.
This time it carried a passenger, Laika the dog.
While on the other hand, the current political and societal situation made people contemplate if we, as a human race, had become so powerful we could actually annihilate ourselves. The answer to that simple question is yes. That's why everything is radioactive, huge, and terrifying in this decade. Atomic energy was relatively new, and its possible applications were the subject of a lot of speculation. So both literature and cinema took advantage of the nuclear craze to create many science fiction stories that had the main basis of what if? And the most common question in this regard was, what if that was this size? What if ants were huge? Or spiders? Maybe an octopus? Giant monster crabs, anyone? Maybe you'll be afraid of a giant middle-aged man. What about a pissed-off giant woman? And the list goes on. Richard Matheson, whose previous work was already infused with a sense of paranoia, had a similar question, but he inverted this overdone premise and instead asked, what if a man started to become smaller? And most importantly, would he still matter? In an age where science fiction still relied a lot on spectacle, the incredible shrinking man used the tropes of its genre to create a story with social commentary and a character study that takes place in a fantastical environment grounded in reality. The main character not only finds himself in a life or death situation, that actually comes later, because before being hunted by a spider, his own identity is thrown into question. The role of the man in society was that of the breadwinner. Masculinity was extremely valuable to the average Joe of this decade, but it was a highly fragile concept too. The 50s saw big alterations in gender roles, as many women started holding more independent positions in the family dynamic. They didn't have to be the stay-at-home wife anymore. As society kept seeing big changes after the Second World War, women found more and more ways to break away from old social norms, from roles that had been imposed on them for centuries. This paradigm shift made some men feel small.
Look at me!
As he shrinks, Scott questions himself. How can he still be a man? He can't even work anymore, so he's not able to support his family, like a man should. He even has to move into a dollhouse that accommodates his size, a harsh, degrading reality for a man of the 50s. His problems couldn't possibly get bigger, he thinks. But when he's lost in the basement, his own mortality and place in the world are put into question. He has regressed to a more primitive state of existence. It's not about living now, it's about survival. Perhaps jungle life, despite physical danger, was a relaxing one. There were no political connivings necessary, no financial arenas to struggle in, no nerve-knotting races for superior rungs on the social ladder. There was only to be or not to be. It was stories like this one that inspired a more profound and meaningful style of science fiction storytelling. Subsequent decades have seen a rise in popularity of the genre, and it has now become a mainstream presence in all media, used prominently to explore different aspects of the human condition. Look how far we've come. But we are not done yet, so let's go back one last time. Scott survives the showdown with his mortal enemy, but the fight is not over. It is implied throughout the whole narrative that Scott will disappear when he reaches a certain size. He'll vanish from the earth. He will be no more. So, after his triumph against the spider, the victory feels short-lived, as he knows he doesn't have much time left. It is at this moment when Scott finally accepts his fate. But now, in the final hours, even hope had vanished, yet he could smile. At a point without hope, he had found contentment. He knew he had tried and there was nothing to be sorry for. And this was complete victory, because it was a victory over himself. Exhausted, Scott lies down, closes his eyes, and falls asleep for the last time. Except it is not the last time. Scott wakes up, confused. He's smaller, but he's still here. He's alive. And he finally understands. The question answered. Does he still matter? Yes, he does. To a man, 0 inches meant nothing. 0 meant nothing. But to nature, there was no 0. It seems so simple now. He would never disappear, because there was no point of non-existence in the universe. Scott Carey ran into his new world, searching.